I have always believed that good fences make good neighbors, but great pools make the best communities. For 7 years, my backyard oasis was the unofficial heart of Oakwood Heights. The sparkling blue water, comfortable lounge chairs, and meticulously maintained garden created a sanctuary where neighbors became friends and friends became family. My name is Michael, and when I purchased this property, the previous owner had begun construction on what would become my pride and joy, a large, resort-style pool with a small waterfall feature. I invested considerable personal funds to complete the project, adding heating systems, proper lighting, and safety features that exceeded local regulations. The fact that the pool was technically built on my property never seemed important. I maintained it myself, paid for the chemicals, repairs, and utilities without complaint. During those first summers, I established an open-door policy. Neighbors could enjoy the pool as long as they respected simple rules: clean up after yourself, no diving, and no unaccompanied children. It was an arrangement built on mutual respect rather than written bylaws. Barbecues became legendary, birthdays were celebrated poolside, and even wedding photos were taken beside the tranquil water. Those were peaceful days. That was before Karen Williams moved into the beige colonial at the end of our cul-de-sac. Karen arrived in spring with a moving truck and what I would later recognize as a superiority complex. She was impeccably dressed even on moving day, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, designer sunglasses perched on her nose despite the overcast weather. I introduced myself, offered help unloading, even invited her to the upcoming weekend pool gathering. She smiled thinly, appraising me and my home with calculation rather than appreciation. I did not realize it then, but I had already been categorized as a problem to be solved. Within 2 months, Karen had maneuvered herself onto the Homeowners Association board. Within 4, she had been appointed president after our previous president relocated unexpectedly. The transition was not democratic so much as opportunistic. Most neighbors were too busy with work and family to attend meetings regularly. Karen, however, never missed an opportunity to expand her influence. The first signs of trouble arrived in mailboxes across the neighborhood. New memos, printed on expensive cardstock with the HOA logo prominently displayed, began appearing weekly. Lawn height compliance notice, approved color palette reminder, exterior decoration restrictions. Each document referenced bylaw numbers and included threats of fines in bold text. I initially dismissed these as administrative enthusiasm. That was my first mistake. One perfect June evening, I was adjusting the string lights around the pool area when a sharp voice interrupted my work. Karen stood at the gate, clipboard in hand, wearing what I would come to recognize as her inspection uniform, white capri pants and a pastel polo shirt. "Those lights are not on the approved exterior decoration list," she said, not bothering with a greeting. Section 14.3 clearly states that all exterior lighting must be submitted for approval before installation. I laughed, thinking she was joking. "These are just party lights, Karen. We have had them up every summer. Everyone loves them." Her expression did not change. "Rules exist for a reason, Michael. I will need you to remove them immediately or face a compliance fine." "This is my property," I replied, confusion giving way to irritation. "The lights are not permanent fixtures." "The pool area falls under HOA jurisdiction for aesthetic consistency," she stated, making a note on her clipboard. "You have 24 hours to comply." As she turned to leave, I noticed her eyes lingering on every detail of my pool area, not with admiration but with assessment. She did not see a space where community thrived. She saw a territory to be controlled. That evening marked the first battle in what would become a suburban Cold War. Karen had not come to our neighborhood to make friends or build community. She had come to establish dominance through bureaucracy, and for reasons I could not yet understand, she had decided that my pool, my property, my passion, would be the centerpiece of her campaign. What she failed to recognize was that beneath my neighborly exterior lived a man who did not surrender easily, especially not to bullies hiding behind bylaws and badges. July brought record temperatures and a heat wave that made my pool more popular than ever. It also brought a fever of regulatory enforcement unlike anything our neighborhood had experienced. Karen moved through Oakwood Heights like a storm system, leaving citations and compliance notices in her wake. My mailbox became a repository for her administrative aggression. Monday, notice of unapproved plantings near the pool deck. Wednesday, warning about excessive noise levels during weekend gatherings. Friday, demand for immediate installation of a specific type of pool cover, one that would cost thousands to purchase and install. Each document arrived in an official envelope. Each listed specific bylaws I had allegedly violated, and each threatened financial penalties that escalated with noncompliance. I attempted reason. I invited Karen to discuss these issues over coffee one morning, hoping to establish common ground. She arrived with a 3-ring binder filled with highlighted HOA regulations, community guidelines from other neighborhoods, and printed photographs of my property with violations circled in red marker. "The guidelines are quite clear, Michael," she said, not touching the coffee I had prepared. "The community has standards that must be maintained. But many of these rules have never been enforced before," I pointed out. "Some of them conflict with county regulations, and others seem arbitrary." "Previous leadership was lax," she replied. "I intend to restore order and property values by targeting my pool specifically. I am applying rules consistently across all properties," she said, though her tightening grip on her pen suggested otherwise. I appealed to the HOA board, hoping for intervention. The meeting was held in the community center, with Karen presiding. Board members shifted uncomfortably as I presented my case, showing the progression of increasingly restrictive notices. When I finished speaking, the silence was telling. "We appreciate your concerns," said Tom Reynolds, the board treasurer who had once been a regular at my weekend barbecues. "But President Williams is following the bylaws as written. Perhaps you could be more cooperative." Their eyes avoided mine. Karen had either intimidated them into submission or convinced them that her crusade was legitimate. Either way, I stood alone. I began documenting everything, photographing my property daily, recording interactions, saving every notice and email. I consulted the county registry to verify property lines and HOA jurisdiction. I reviewed the original community charter. Knowledge, I realized, would be my shield and eventually my sword. Karen's campaign intensified. She began leaving notes on the windshields of guests parked near my home. Visitor parking limited to 2 hours. Residents only beyond this point. Some neighbors stopped coming altogether, not wanting to be caught in the crossfire. Then came the morning I found her inside my gate, taking close-up photos of pool equipment. It was 7:15 a.m., and I had stepped outside to collect the newspaper. "Excuse me," I said, startling her. "What are you doing on my property without permission?" She straightened, unembarrassed at being caught. "Documenting safety violations. The filter housing needs to be brought up to code." "You need permission to enter private property," I stated firmly. "Please leave now." "The HOA has inspection rights," she countered, but stepped toward the gate nonetheless. Not without notice, not at dawn, and not without the homeowner present. She paused at the gate. This is not personal, Michael. This is about maintaining standards. But the gleam in her eyes told a different story. This was deeply personal, though I still did not understand why. The final escalation came a week later. I returned from grocery shopping to find a laminated notice attached to my pool gate. The official HOA letterhead announced in bold red type. Notice of restricted access. This communal facility is temporarily closed to unauthorized personnel pending compliance review. Homeowner Michael Davidson is prohibited from use until further notice. Trespassers will be reported to authorities. She had actually banned me from my own pool, on my own property, using authority she did not possess. I removed the sign carefully, added it to my growing file of evidence, and sat down at my kitchen table. Through the window, I could see the sunlight playing across the water I had paid for, maintained, and generously shared. The pool that had brought so much joy to so many was now the center of a power struggle I had never asked for. That evening I called a property attorney. This was no longer about petty rules or neighborhood politics. This was about property rights, abuse of power, and a woman who had mistaken my patience for weakness. Karen had declared war with paperwork and policies. I would respond with something far more powerful, the law itself. The Saturday of my family's annual summer reunion dawned bright and perfect. Fluffy clouds dotted an azure sky as I prepared the yard for guests. My brother Dave and his wife had driven 5 hours with their kids. My parents, now in their 70s, had flown in from Arizona. This gathering was a tradition predating the HOA itself, a day of connection, laughter, and creating memories around the pool that had become the heart of our extended family. Tables were set with colorful cloths. The grill stood ready for the hamburgers and hot dogs stacked in the refrigerator. Floats and pool toys waited for eager hands. I had even hung special banners welcoming everyone, careful to use removable hooks that would leave no marks, a small concession to Karen's aesthetic crusade. Neighbors began arriving around noon, bringing side dishes and desserts as they had for years. The atmosphere was relaxed but tinged with an undercurrent of tension. Everyone knew about the ongoing conflict with Karen, though most avoided mentioning it directly. Instead, they cast occasional glances toward the street, wondering if she would make an appearance. They did not have to wonder long. At precisely 1:45 p.m., as children splashed in the shallow end and adults chatted on the deck, Karen strode through the gate. She was not alone. 2 other HOA board members followed several steps behind, looking uncomfortable but committed to their role in her performance. Conversations faltered. The only sounds were the children's laughter and the pool filter's gentle hum. Karen approached me directly, ignoring my elderly parents seated nearby. She wore a crisp white dress and carried not just her clipboard but a folder embossed with the HOA logo. "Michael," she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This gathering exceeds the permitted occupancy for residential pool use according to Section 22.1 of the HOA guidelines." I kept my voice calm, though my hands trembled slightly. "This is a family reunion, Karen. These are my relatives and a few close neighbors." "I count 37 people," she replied, consulting her clipboard. "The maximum allowed is 20 without special event permission, which you did not request." My brother Dave stood up, protective instinct activating. I motioned for him to stay back. This was my battle. "Furthermore," Karen continued, raising a printed document, "you are currently prohibited from using the community pool facility due to ongoing compliance issues." My mother's confused voice broke through. Community pool. Is this not Michael's own pool? Karen turned to her with practiced sympathy. Ma'am, while the pool is situated on this property, it falls under HOA jurisdiction for community use. Your son has been temporarily suspended from access due to repeated violations. That is absolutely false, I stated firmly, feeling heat rise in my face. If you do not vacate the water immediately, Karen announced, addressing everyone now, I will have no choice but to call local authorities to report trespassing on community property. The children had stopped swimming, hovering at the pool's edge, sensing the adult tension. My nephew looked close to tears. My father stood up, leaning on his cane, dignity radiating despite his confusion. Rather than create a scene that would ruin the day completely, I made a decision. I would retreat now and fight later. Everyone out of the pool, please, I said quietly. We will continue the party inside. Michael, this is ridiculous, my brother protested. Not now, I replied. Please let us just move inside. The exodus from the water was slow and confused. Karen stood watching, satisfaction evident in her posture. As the last child climbed out, she approached the edge and took photographs of the vacated community facility with her phone. The area will remain closed until further notice, she announced before turning to leave, her minions trailing behind her. The remainder of the reunion continued indoors, subdued and awkward. Several neighbors made excuses and left early. My parents asked questions I could not fully answer. How could someone claim authority over property I owned? Why would she target our family specifically? What had I done to provoke such hostility? That night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone beside the forbidden water. The underwater lights illuminated the gentle ripples, creating patterns that had once brought me peace. Now they only reminded me of boundaries violated and dignity trampled. In the following weeks, I received fewer visitors. Invitations to neighborhood events dwindled. Then came the final insult. Karen began hosting approved community pool events in my backyard. Select neighbors received invitations. I did not. The HOA board dismissed my formal complaint with a form letter suggesting I work toward cooperation rather than conflict. The message was clear: submit or be isolated. I chose a third option. They say knowledge is power, but information weaponized by determination becomes unstoppable. I began my campaign not with confrontation but with research. I took a week off work and dedicated myself to understanding exactly what ground I stood on, legally, literally, and strategically. My first stop was the county records office. The clerk seemed surprised by my request for the original property surveys and deeds from before the development was established. Hours turned into days as I meticulously traced the history of my land through years of documentation. What I discovered was revelatory. My property had once been part of a larger estate. When the development was planned 15 years ago, the original owner had sold most of the land but retained special provisions for the section I now owned. The pool had been started before the HOA was even formed. More importantly, the final property agreement specified that, while certain exterior aesthetics fell under HOA purview, recreational facilities remained exclusively under homeowner control. In simple terms, Karen had been enforcing authority she never possessed. I contacted Daniel Hoffman, a property attorney specializing in HOA disputes. He reviewed my findings with increasing interest. This is quite clear, he said, tapping the original covenant documents. The pool is explicitly excluded from HOA jurisdiction. Their claim of authority is fundamentally invalid. "So what do we do?" I asked. "First, we document the intrusions and false claims. Then we prepare formal notifications. And if necessary, we pursue injunctive relief," he explained. "But I suspect when confronted with these documents, they will back down quickly." I disagreed. "You have not met Karen." I spent the next 3 weeks building my case methodically. I installed security cameras that captured Karen's uninvited inspections, 7 in total, all without notice or permission. I collected testimonials from neighbors who had received inconsistent enforcement of the same rules. The retired judge on Maple Street had never been cited for his wind chimes, while the young Asian couple across from him received weekly notices about theirs. The Williams family's unauthorized basketball hoop remained untouched, while the Rodriguez family's identical one resulted in fines. A pattern emerged. Karen's enforcement was not random, it was targeted. Those who questioned her authority or failed to show proper deference became subjects of her regulatory wrath. I filed formal complaints with the City Housing Authority documenting the selective enforcement. I submitted evidence of Karen entering private property without consent. I requested an official review of HOA jurisdiction boundaries based on the original property documents. All of this remained invisible to Karen. On the surface, I appeared to have surrendered. I waved politely when our paths crossed. I removed the non-compliant planters from my front yard. I even approved her request to host an HOA board meeting at the community pool the following month. My attorney prepared the formal legal notice, a cease and desist letter detailing the property boundaries, the specific covenant exclusions, and the history of unauthorized access. We included copies of the original property documents with relevant sections highlighted. The letter demanded immediate acknowledgement that the pool was private property, a public retraction of all claims of HOA authority over it, and compensation for damages caused by false claims. We did not send it immediately. Timing in warfare, even suburban warfare, is everything. Karen, meanwhile, grew bolder in her appropriation. She had keys made for the pool gate and distributed them to approved residents. She established an official schedule for community pool hours. She even went so far as to hire a part-time attendant, paid from HOA funds, to monitor usage and enforce her growing list of regulations. All of this was documented, photographed, and added to our legal file. Then came her most audacious move yet. She announced an elaborate pool party to celebrate Community Unity Day, a fabricated holiday designed to showcase her leadership. Formal invitations were sent to select residents. Catering was arranged. A professional photographer was hired. The event would feature Karen's speech about neighborhood cohesion and property values. My invitation never arrived. Not that I required one for access to my own backyard. That announcement was the final piece I needed. I contacted my attorney with a simple message: "Hold the legal notice. I have a better idea." The wheels were in motion. Karen believed she was planning a celebration of her authority. In reality, she was orchestrating the perfect stage for her own undoing. The Community Unity celebration was scheduled for the last Saturday in August. Karen had spared no expense, using HOA funds, of course. Premium invitations had been sent to 70 approved households. Responses were tracked with military precision. The event promised catered refreshments, live music from a local string quartet, and professional photography to document our thriving community spirit. 3 days before the event, I approached Karen as she supervised the delivery of rental chairs. "I would like to help with the preparations," I offered, my expression carefully neutral. She regarded me with suspicion, That is not necessary. I insist, I said. This is, after all, my property. I know the electrical system, the pool equipment. I could be useful. Her eyes narrowed, calculating. I could almost see her weighing the benefits of having me under her direct supervision against the risk of refusing what appeared to be an olive branch. Very well, she finally conceded. You can assist with setup on Saturday morning. Be here at 9. I nodded appreciatively. I will take care of the pool preparations myself. Chemistry, filtration, temperature. I know exactly how to make it perfect. She seemed pleased by what she perceived as submission. Fine, just ensure everything is up to code. Oh, it will be, I promised. Saturday dawned gloriously. I arrived early before Karen and began my preparations. I tested the water chemistry, adjusted the pH levels, and ensured the temperature was perfect. But my most important work happened below deck, in the equipment room that Karen had never bothered to understand. The pool featured a professional-grade drainage system, necessary for winterization in our climate. The system included an emergency rapid drain function, designed to quickly empty the pool in case of contamination or required urgent repairs. I had never used it before. Today, I ensured it was in perfect working order, quietly testing the mechanism and confirming the drainage path. Karen arrived precisely at 9, clipboard in hand, already issuing directions to her committee of volunteers. She barely acknowledged my presence as I worked quietly around the pool area. By noon, the transformation was complete. White chairs were arranged in perfect rows. A podium stood at the shallow end where Karen would deliver her address. Tables laden with expensive refreshments lined the deck. String lights, ironically, very similar to those I had been forced to remove, draped the perimeter. Guests began arriving at 1 o'clock. The neighborhood's most influential residents, doctors, lawyers, successful entrepreneurs, arrived first, greeted personally by Karen. Others filtered in more casually. Within an hour, the pool area was filled with nearly 100 people, all dressed in summer finery, sipping champagne and making careful small talk. I remained inconspicuous, nodding politely to those who noticed me. Karen had positioned herself as the center of attention, moving from group to group, accepting compliments on the beautiful event. Few realized or remembered that the sparkling oasis they were enjoying had been built and maintained by my hands, not hers. At precisely 2:30, Karen clinked her glass for attention. The crowd quieted as she moved to the podium positioned strategically at the pool's edge. The photographer positioned himself for the perfect shot. Karen framed against the pristine blue water, the gathered community before her. "Welcome, friends and neighbors," she began, her voice carrying across the water. "Today we celebrate not just our community, but the standards and values that make Oakwood Heights exceptional." As she continued her carefully rehearsed speech about property values and community guidelines, I made my way quietly to the equipment room door, partially hidden by decorative shrubs. I entered silently, closing the door behind me. Karen reached the climax of her address. "Together, we have transformed this space into a true community treasure." That was my cue. I grasped the large red emergency drainage lever and pulled it firmly downward. The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. A thunderous gurgling filled the air as the powerful drainage system activated. Water began to spiral downward in the deep end, creating a roaring vortex. Chaos erupted above. I emerged from the equipment room to witness the pandemonium. Guests backed away from the rapidly emptying pool. Karen stood frozen mid-sentence, watching in horror as her perfect event literally went down the drain. Stop it right now," Karen screamed, abandoning the podium and rushing toward me. Her face had contorted into a mask of rage and disbelief. "What have you done?" The crowd stood transfixed as thousands of gallons of water disappeared with astonishing speed. The powerful drainage system I had maintained so carefully over the years performed flawlessly. Within minutes, the once pristine pool was nothing but a damp concrete bowl. "I have drained my pool," I answered calmly, loud enough for everyone to hear, "as is my right as the legal owner of this property." "This is vandalism of community property," Karen shouted, her perfectly applied makeup now streaked with angry tears. "Call the police immediately." Several guests had already produced phones, but they were not calling authorities. They were recording the confrontation. In the age of social media, spectacular public meltdowns rarely go undocumented. "Actually," I said, producing a folder from behind a nearby plant, "I have something you might want to see first." I handed copies of the property documents to Karen and to several board members who stood nearby. "These are the original property deeds and covenants. As you can see on page 3, the recreational facilities, specifically this pool, are explicitly excluded from HOA jurisdiction. They remain the private property of the homeowner." Karen glanced at the documents, then tossed them aside. "These are forgeries." "They are certified copies from county records," I replied. "My attorney has the originals, speaking of whom." On cue, Daniel Hoffman stepped forward from the crowd. He had arrived as my guest, unnoticed until now. "Ms. Williams," he said formally, "I am representing Mr. Davidson in this matter. I can confirm that all HOA claims of authority over this pool facility are invalid and legally unenforceable. Furthermore, I have prepared documentation of numerous instances of trespassing, unauthorized access, and fraudulent claims of jurisdiction." The crowd murmured. Several board members exchanged worried glances. "Additionally," my attorney continued, "the use of HOA funds for today's event constitutes misappropriation, as you have effectively spent community money on a private property without proper authorization." Karen looked desperately to her allies on the board, but their expressions had shifted from support to concern. Tom Reynolds, the treasurer, was already backing away, his financial officer instincts alerting him to potential liability. "This is absurd," Karen insisted, her voice now shrill. "The pool has always been community property." "Then perhaps you can explain this," I said, nodding to my neighbor Elaine, who had helped me prepare a display board. She unveiled it with dramatic flair, revealing a timeline of the property's history, complete with photographs and document excerpts. "The pool was built before the HOA existed. It has always been private property that I chose to share, until you made it impossible." The confrontation lasted another 20 minutes, but Karen's defeat was already certain. As guests began to leave, many stopped to express their support and their apologies for not speaking up sooner. Several admitted they had been intimidated by Karen's aggressive enforcement tactics. By evening, the video of the draining pool and subsequent confrontation had gone viral within our community's social networks. By morning, local news had picked up the story of HOA overreach drains away. Within days, the City Housing Authority had launched an investigation into Karen's selective enforcement practices. The emergency HOA board meeting called the following week was unusually well attended. Karen arrived with her own attorney, but the outcome was predetermined. She was suspended pending investigation, then formally removed from the board. 3 weeks later, a moving truck appeared outside her beige Colonial. Karen departed without fanfare, leaving behind an empty house and a neighborhood she had failed to conquer. The refilling of the pool became a community event in itself. Neighbors I had not seen in months came by to watch the water level rise slowly, bringing refreshments and conversation. Children sat at the edge, dangling their feet as the water climbed inch by inch toward their toes. I used the opportunity to make improvements, replacing older tiles, updating the filtration system, installing more energy-efficient lighting. Each enhancement was a statement of reclamation. This was my space, restored to its proper purpose. When the water finally reached the appropriate level, I tested the chemistry carefully, ensuring everything was perfect for what would come next. Then I sent out invitations, simple, handwritten notes rather than formal announcements. Pool reopening, all welcome, no clipboards allowed. The gathering was everything the community unity celebration had tried to be but could not. Authentic, relaxed, genuinely inclusive. Children splashed while adults chatted. Neighbors who had been alienated by Karen's regime returned cautiously at first, then with increasing comfort. As the evening progressed, I stood at the edge of the pool, watching joy return to the space that had been the center of so much conflict. My brother Dave, who had driven up for the occasion, handed me a cold drink. "Say something," he suggested, nodding toward the gathered neighbors. "They are waiting for it." I had not planned a speech, but I found myself addressing the group nonetheless. "Friends," I began, "this pool has always been about one thing: community. Not rules, not property values, not power, just people enjoying each other's company." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "I did not drain the pool that day out of spite or revenge," I continued. "I did it because some things are worth standing up for. The right to share what is yours on your own terms. The freedom to build connections without fear of punishment. The simple dignity of being respected in your own home." I raised my glass. To neighbors becoming friends again, to standing up when it matters, and to remembering that the best communities are built on kindness, not control. The evening continued long after sunset, the underwater lights illuminating smiling faces and renewed connections. Karen was gone, but she had left us with an unexpected gift: the reminder that community, real community, is too valuable to surrender to those who would weaponize rules against it. Some lessons, like the best pools, run deep.